It's Jackie Robinson Day, and I'm asking us all to pay tribute to the great man and not just pay lip service to him.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, whatever they're calling it these days, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. That's Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. But the best way to get a hold of me is to just leave a message right here on YouTube, and I have a tendency to answer those questions. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Before we get on for today's show, let's go through what the trivia question was. Trivia question was, who was the first San Diego Padre to hit 40 home runs? And a couple of you had some interesting answers. A bunch of you thought it was Dave Winfield, who had some of his best years of his career with the San Diego Padres, but he never cracked 40 as a Padre. My good friend Cubs fan with an 8, he asked if it was Phil Plantier, which was another terrific guess, and boy, what a wonderful batting stance he had. But nope, he never hit the 40 mark. It was, and who got it right? Big John 08865, who's an everyday Sully listener, got it right. It was indeed Ken Caminiti. So, yep, that was a trivia question for today. Now, you'll see I'm doing a couple of you said that you liked when I went on location. So I'm going on location right now. I am in, I'll just tell you, I've done from here before. I'm right outside of Pasadena City Hall here in Pasadena, California, home of the Rose Bowl. And right outside of Pasadena City Hall is the Robinson Memorial. Right there, that's the bust of Mac Robinson. And right there, that's Jackie Robinson. The brothers they grew up here in Pasadena. They were born in Georgia, but their mother moved them here. And I think you know who Jackie Robinson is. I think we all know who Jackie Robinson is because it is Jackie Robinson Day. Mac Robinson, right there, was an Olympian and a medalist in the 1936 Olympics alongside Jesse Owens. That was the Olympics that Adolf Hitler hosted and was trying to make have it be a great display of his mindset of racial superiority, and Jesse Owens basically did laps around that. Mac Robinson won a couple of medals there as well. We're honoring Jackie Robinson today. All of Major League Baseball honors Jackie Robinson today. And this has been a great tradition that's been going on since the 50th anniversary of Jackie breaking the color barrier and being the first player in, well, we have to phrase this in a very specific way, the first player in the modern era, African American, to play in organized baseball in one of the major leagues, American or National League. And he broke the color barrier on April 15th, 1947, when the Brooklyn Dodgers took on the Boston Braves. The manager that day was actually Clyde Sukeforth, the scout who scouted Jackie Robinson. The manager was supposed to be Leo DeRocher, but DeRocher was suspended that year for gambling and or for having some ties to gamblers. You know what? Always avoid those gamblers. So the first couple of games between the Braves and Dodgers were managed by Clyde Sukeforth before Bert Schotten came in as the manager. And we all know the story, or at least I think we all know the story. Jackie was signed, spent a year in Montreal, where he played for the Montreal Royals minor league team. The thought process was it would be easier for him to break in with a team that was in Canada than in the Deep South. That was probably right. And then he broke in and won the first ever Rookie of the Year award in his initial season with the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Dodgers went on to win the National League pennant and had their great run in Brooklyn before they traveled 3,000 miles here to Los Angeles County. And Jackie became a spark plug for the team, ignited the team with speed and with an intense style of play. And with his inclusion in the game and seeing that the integration of baseball could work, you started to see a trickle of Negro League stars coming in to the American and National League. They came in faster to the National League than the American League, to be sure. But eventually both leagues were integrated. And by the time the Red Sox, who had a chance to become the first integrated team, instead they became the last of the original teams to integrate. That's all I need to say about them. All the teams had players who were both black and white, and eventually the diversity went into the Caribbean, as you started to see stars like Luis Aparicio and Orlando Cepeda, and eventually the great Roberto Clemente. Jackie Robinson was the one who paved the way. He was signed by Branch Rickey, who went against a lot of the owner's gentleman agreement to not include players who were not white into the league, and with that changed the history of baseball, and in many ways changed American history. And a lot of people, including Dr. King, has pointed to Robinson's inclusion to Major League Baseball as one of the great stepping stones to start the civil rights movement of the 50s and into the 60s, and the eventual passing of the Civil Rights Act in the mid-1960s. That's the story that's we all been told, and we all have heard the stories of Branch Rickey telling Jackie Robinson to not fight back. He was going to get racial epithets thrown at him. He was going to get abuse, but don't fight back, because if he fights back, that will destroy the whole experiment. And there was probably some logic to that in the first couple of years. And his instruction to not fight back was encompassed in his first two seasons in the major leagues, 1947 and 1948. Now, I've always had a little bit of a problem with the fact that so many people have focused on that aspect of his story. Even the very well-intentioned and successful film 42, starring the late Chadwick Boseman and Harrison Ford, focus only on the first year when he couldn't fight back, thus making the focus of him a martyr. We see that told over and over again with this story, that he was a martyr. He didn't fight back. He showed his strength by silently taking it all and showing them that he could play alongside. Yeah, that's true for the first two seasons. After the second season, he started to fight back. The restraints were taken off of him. And Jackie the Fighter became the National League Most Valuable Player and fought until the day he died. And I feel that Jackie the Fighter, in many ways, is a much more interesting and important character in American history than Jackie the Martyr. Jackie the Fighter fought against the press when he felt that he was being slighted, pointed out hypocrisy in terms of how people were treated of different colors. He fought amongst other players. He fought amongst his teammates. And he fought after he left the game of baseball. He never stopped fighting. There's a myth that Jackie was retired because he found out he was traded to the New York Giants and he hated the Giants so much he wouldn't play for them. Yes, he was traded to the Giants and then he did retire, but it wasn't because he hated the New York Giants. It was because he decided it was a time to do something else. And he became an executive at the Chock-full of Nuts Coffee Company, one of the few companies that would hire African Americans in any sort of executive role. He felt that he did his job as a player and as a role model, and now he had to fight for something more important. Using his fame and using his respect, he set up many businesses and helped set up the Freedom Bank so people who looked like him could get loans and get homes that they could set down and build businesses. This was an age of redlining, which, let's face it, isn't really over yet. This was an age where the suburbs were being formed, with a great selling point being they were going to be white only. This was an age where banks would not lend money to people who weren't white. This was an age where you couldn't start businesses except if it was like a liquor business or something within a red line district. And if you don't know what redlining is, look it up. It is not a pretty part of our history. And Jackie fought to try to change that, not just on the field, not just silently, but vocally. He took on the white establishment. He took on Malcolm X. He took on anybody who he felt was not in the right. He supported Republican candidates when he felt that the Democratic Party was taking black votes for granted, but he rejected the Republican Party when he saw the Goldwaters and Nixons were taking over. He was hard to pin down in terms of a category because he was a fighter. And that's the person who should be glorified. That's the type of history we should be learning about Jackie Robinson. And we're living in a time right now where it's important to examine our own biases and to see if we're going to honor Jackie, let's do so in an honest manner. Basketball and hockey playoffs are heating up, and there's no better way to turn your sports knowledge into real rewards than with Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and you're in. You can even combine across sports, basketball, hockey, baseball, and more for your chance to win up to 2,000 times your cash. I'm going to say Luka. He's going to get more than 28 points, and my boy Jason Tatum is going to get more than 8 rebounds. And what I love is how easy it is to set up your lineup in about 60 seconds or even less. PrizePicks even runs cool promos like Taco Tuesday, where they discount player projections up to 25% for even more value. And payouts are fast, safe, and secure. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. There's a tendency when talking about Jackie Robinson's story to sanitize it and make it easier for audiences to swallow. To focus on, as I mentioned, his martyrdom, but also his many allies. Leo DeRocher fought for him. Branch Rickey brought him in. And then, of course, there's the story of Pee Wee Reese putting his arm around him in a game in Cincinnati. A story which I covered in a previous podcast is apocryphal. There's no evidence it ever happened. And even how it's portrayed in the movie 42, it doesn't make any sense. Pee Wee Reese was at shortstop and she ran across the diamond to do that. Many years later, Jackie moved from first to second base, where that meeting would have made more sense. And with Jackie's every move being followed by the predominantly black press and people like Wendell Smith, they never mentioned it when it happened. There's no photographic evidence of it happening. And the game that it supposedly happened was mentioned by the black press as basically being free of incident. The story's invented to relieve guilt. And there's a lot of guilt to be relieved in terms of how the story is told. You know, you read about some of the people who were against him, and the Chapmans, who was the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, very famously was screaming racial epithets at him, and his teammates came to his defense. But the writers of the time basically tried to treat it as a non-story. The Sporting News, which was the newspaper of record of baseball, questioned whether or not Jackie had major league talent. And oh yeah, by the way, the sports writers, who at the time were the powerful narrators and in many ways authors of baseball legends, certainly at a time before television, they would have winter dinners where they would, hand out awards, but also, have big speeches and have a big show. A common event in these for decades was a minstrel show. And the year that Jackie signed with the Dodgers organization, and they knew he was going to be assigned to Montreal, they had a man in blackface wearing a Montreal uniform. But do you know what? This wasn't that long ago. This isn't the distant past. Jackie's widow is still alive. Rachel Robinson is still with us. She's very old, but she's still alive. Jackie's children, save for one of them, 2 of his 3 children are still alive. And they're younger than my mom. Remember, the Civil Rights Act is less than 10 years older than I am. Now, I'm getting old, but I'm not that old. This is not ancient history we're talking about. The people who grew up in the age where they would have been booing and yelling at Jackie Robinson, some of those people are still, if they would have been children at that time, some are still serving us in Congress and in Senate. I'm not saying that they were one of them, but it's not out of the question. This is not ancient history. So when we honor number 42, it's not like we're talking about the antebellum South or the Salem witch trial. We're talking about something that happened in the age of television. But we also should use this day not just to honor this great man, but to really, and did I mention really, examine our own biases and examine some of the biases that still exist. It wasn't that long ago. It was in this century, in this millennium, where the thought process was a Japanese player could not make it in Major League Baseball as a position player. And when Ichiro signed, there were a lot of people who rolled their eyes saying, yeah, this is not going to work. How's Shohei Ohtani working for you? How's Ichiro? Or Hideki Matsui? Or many of the other tremendous players? It makes you look back at the Sadaoro O and some of the other great players of the Japanese leagues in the past. Could they have succeeded in Major League Baseball? Were our biases there? Were our biases there where Kim Eng becomes a general manager? And when she got hired, there were no shortage of people saying, yeah, but is she qualified, or is this a DEI hire? Is this just being done for diversity? While her resume is so large that if she sent it to you as a PDF file, your computer would crash. And nobody asked that same question when a parade of anonymous dudes who were frat brothers of previous GMs are hired as a general manager. Kim Eng gets her shot, takes the freaking Marlins to the postseason twice, and then loses her job. Biases are still there. Ask any woman who works in the world of sports, whether it's as a coach, whether it's as a general manager, as a broadcaster. Hell, ask some of the women here in the Locked On Podcast Network. There are biases out there. You know what? You have rooted for someone who has played Major League Baseball, who has not had your sexual orientation. And that's an all-encompassing statement, because if you're a heterosexual, I guarantee you will root for a gay player. And if you're a gay person, then guess what? You probably root for a heterosexual player. Yeah. Do you think it's just Glenn Burke and Billy Beane? No, it's not. And yes, eventually some players are going to come out as players, and eventually you will find out that it doesn't matter, that we have biases. What if a player comes in from a country that we have a antagonistic relationship with, or someone who has a different religion than you? We have biases still. And do you know what? It's very important, if you consider yourself a progressive person or whatever the heck that means, that you don't pat yourself on the back too much. I have my biases. I have my prejudices. And I don't know what they all are yet. Because we're going to look back at how we talk, what we talk, the phrases we use, the biases that we had in 2025. And in 2050, we're going to look back at them and say, oh man, that's cringeworthy. And say, yeah, but that was the time. Which is another reason why I don't always throw someone under the bus from a different era. Yes, when you have someone like Chapman, who's a horrible human being, that's one thing. But when you hear things like Connie Mack was not in favor of integration. Well, Connie Mack was 100 years old when integration was about to happen. He was from a different time. He probably knew Confederate soldiers, for God's sakes. You know, people evolve. Societies evolve. And we have to be honest about it. We have to be honest and examine our history. We have to examine our history, warts and all. History's not supposed to be a lullaby or a bedtime story. There are going to be ugly moments in our history. And if we just pretend they didn't happen because it makes us feel uncomfortable, then we are guilty of erasing it and erasing the acts of the people who did their best to change the history for the better. And it's important to not blame ourselves for what happened in the past. I don't take any responsibility for what happened in the past, but I take responsibility to make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future. This is not about making people feel guilty about what happened in the past. It's to say, remember it, learn from it. And you could still love our country, our history, your society, your people you belong to. Just like you can love your family, warts and all. What, is your family perfect? You still love them, right? And we could do that. You could be a proud American, like I am, and say, there have been moments in our history that have been less than optimal. And there have been great men and women who did their best to change it for the better. But we can't ignore the bad parts and only celebrate the good parts. How can you celebrate Jackie Robinson and not acknowledge institutional racism? How can you acknowledge and wear number 42 on your back and not bring up why his playing on the Dodgers was so significant? What? Just because he was a good second baseman? Is that worth celebrating? Why don't we celebrate Steve Sachs? Hey, there's nothing better than catching a Major League Baseball game live, the crack of the bat, the smell of the grass, the nachos in the plastic helmet. It's all great. If you're going to go last minute, Game Time has made getting tickets easier than ever. With last minute all-in pricing and a lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the stress out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Plus, tickets prices drop as the game gets closer, meaning you can score an incredible deal. I did when I went up to Sacramento, and I got to see the A's, the Sacramento A's, take on the San Diego Padres. Got a great deal. And there's seats that are available, so do you know what? If you want last minute tickets, Game Time has unbeatable prices, which means more money for those nachos in those helmets. And they have the Game Time Picks feature that makes finding the best deals effortless. It filters out the fluff and highlights the top discounts in the stadium. And I love that I can preview my seat before purchasing. No bad surprises when you get into the stadium. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, they're guaranteed. Now, some of you might be thinking, Sully, let's stick to baseball, okay? We're here to escape. And to that, I'm going to respond, no, I'm not going to stick to baseball. Do you know why? Baseball doesn't stick to baseball. Baseball is a great distraction, yes, but it is a great vehicle that we can use to reflect who we are, how we can improve, and to bring us together. Did baseball stick to baseball when David Ortiz said, this is our effing city in the wake of the Boston Marathon bombing? Did baseball stick to baseball when the players wore the hats that said NYPD and NYFD and Port Authority PD in the wake of September 11th? Was the drama of the home run hit by Mike Piazza post 9/11, was that just because they beat the Braves? Or was there something more than baseball going on there? Baseball's not sticking to baseball today. with everyone wearing number 42. Baseball's not sticking to baseball when we stand up and sing the national anthem, when we have salutes to our veterans, when we stand up to cancer. In the wake of COVID, in the wake of the '89 World Series earthquake, in the wake of the fires right here that devastated part of my hometown of Pasadena, California. Baseball didn't stick to baseball then, because baseball can be a great contributor to having us improve ourselves, come together, and, as I mentioned before, to face our biases. So no, it is critical times to not stick to baseball. These can be critical times to evaluate what we think, to evaluate what's important to us, to evaluate what's worth fighting for. Baseball should and always be a meritocracy. Baseball shouldn't always be a place where it doesn't matter who you are, how you love somebody, who your parents are, how you worship God, how you don't worship God, what color your skin, what the length of your hair. None of that should matter, because if you can throw the ball 100 miles an hour, or if you can hit a home run, or if you can steal second base, that should all be the lone thing you think about your play on the field. And baseball has forced people over the years to face those biases. Jackie broke biases, absolutely. Hank Greenberg and Sandy Koufax broke biases. Hideo Nomo broke biases. Ichiro Suzuki broke biases. Roberto Clemente broke biases. Frank Robinson broke biases. And Kim Eng broke biases. And it will continue going as long as baseball remains a meritocracy, and that we realize that we'll become better. This is Jackie's real legacy. This is what Jackie was really fighting for. And he fought that way, as I mentioned before, right up until his final public appearance. If we honor Jackie Robinson, we can't ignore the stories of our country, warts and all, and saying, hopefully we can be better, hopefully we are better, and hopefully we can continue to get better and not rest on our laurels, and continue to fight and look for the things we need to do, and use baseball as a petri dish of inclusion, a petri dish of not caring about the outside appearances, and rather seeing us all working for one common goal, which is to win, but at the same time not ignoring the differences, acknowledging that growing up in Japan is different than growing up in the Dominican Republic, which is different than growing up in Pasadena, which is different than growing up in Boston. You acknowledge that those are differences, but that shouldn't matter in terms of the goal that we're working together for. And I don't see how that could be a statement anyone has an issue with. And clearly, if you're going to be here clapping for the images of Jackie Robinson, wearing the number 42, and giving the, the lip service to one of the great shining moments in baseball history, and a watershed moment in American history that wasn't that long ago. If we're going to do all that, then let's examine how he fought and what he fought for, and why that will make us a better society, a better country, a better world, and better baseball. So no, I'm not going to stick to baseball. Do you know why? There's too much on the line. There's too much that's important. So happy Jackie Robinson Day, everybody. Let's celebrate it correctly. And that's going to bring us to today's trivia question. Today's trivia question is this. It involves the man whose head you see over my shoulder right now. Who led up the first hit in Jackie Robinson's career in the major leagues, not with the Montreal Royals, not with the Kansas City Monarchs, but who was the first player, and I'll tell you the team, the Boston Braves, who led up Jackie Robinson's first hit in 1947. Put the question right down below, and thanks for being a listener or a subscriber, and stay on this channel. You can see the Locked On MLB game update that we do every single night, and you can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, or whatever they're calling it these days, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, talking about the legacy of this man right here. And let's not forget his brother Mac. This has been Locked On MLB for the 15th day of April 2025. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.